Hello and welcome to another PCC bike walk around. So we are particularly proud of this one because it kind of harps back to the PC.01, PC.02 days, and we want to give you a little bit more detail on it because it's a bloody good looking bike and there's a lot of PCC signatures on this bike, as well as the fact that it looks absolutely awesome. So I'll tell you what, I'll start with the jewel in the crown, and that is the unit garage tank that has been beautifully finished by Valkyrie. The customer wanted a very vintage looking bike, and as you can see, it looks more like an R80 than it does an R9T, even though it's a 69 plate bike. And the unit garage tank gives a lot of focus to that. Along with the unit garage tank ticking the vintage box, we have the back headlight that has been mounted very, very high. A request from the customer is to get it as high as possible to give it that vintage look. As you can see, it absolutely ticks the box perfectly. So something that we normally do on all of our builds is color match a lot of the stuff. So as you can see, we've blacked out the silver ring on the clocks, but we haven't on the headlight. This also ticks the vintage box because the customer wanted it to have that synonymous silver ring that is there on all of the older bikes. So staying with the front end, we've fully blacked out everything front to back on the suspension and all of the parts that are normally silver, a typical PCC blackout kit. We've got the unit garage front mudguard on here, just kissing the top of that tyre, framing the front end of the bike. Now, one of the biggest differences that you'll see is that it has a 17-inch front wheel. And you can say, well, hold on a minute, 17-inch front wheel on a bike that's got a slightly higher suspension setup, and that would be because it started off life as a Scrambler. Something that is very, very important if you want a chunky front tyre and a 17-inch front wheel conversion, which obviously you have to do with the chunky front tyre anyway. So this is running 17s front and rear. Normally on a Scrambler it is a 120/70 on the front with the 150/17 on the rear. We've got a 140/80/17 on the front, and this is a TKC 80 with the 170/60/17 on the rear. So these wheels are actually wheels off of an R9T Pure, not off of a Scrambler. You'll notice that on the Scrambler they have tubeless wheels, these are tubed. So the reason why it's so important that this bike started off life as a Scrambler is because the wheel circumferences will be thrown out if you started this life with a Pure. So the rolling circumference of a 120/70/19 is almost identical to a 140/80/17. Which means that this conversion doesn't throw the ABS out, and the bike and all of its control units are more than happy to crack on. So if you do want to do the fat front tyre conversion, make sure you get yourself a Scrambler and start off with that, and then you won't have any problems with any of the control units. So moving backwards from there, we have a PCC Signature modification, and that is the auxiliary side light on the beautiful unit garage engine pass. Normally we go with the yellow auxiliary light, but the customer wanted to keep that old dispatch bike looking vibe to it, so we've gone with the clear auxiliary light with the side light in it as well. Something that I personally like. I think it's one of the nice touches on this bike. Up front on the cockpit area, we have the wide tracker handlebars. Now, not only does it give the bike the old school look, it really rides old school as well. Gives a really wide sort of dominant feel to the bike, and with the narrowness of the unit garage tank, it just ticks the box both in feeling and the ergonomics of the bike. Not much more to say on that really, just looks and feels great. So as you'll notice, the grips and the seat. So the grips have been matched to the seat by our in-house upholsterer, and you can see the seat itself has been beautifully created to harmoniously fit with the paint job of the tank, with a beautiful PCC crest on the back, which has been foiled in by James, our in-house upholsterer. Beautiful complementary piece on the bike. I love it a lot. Customer wanted absolutely everything on the bike that could be blacked out, blacked out. So like I said, we got the blackout suspension at the front, and then obviously the blacked out seat bracket, and the exhaust system front to back has been Cerakoted, along with all the other touches like the under tray being powder coated, and the engine bars are already black, but the cylinder covers have been powder coated black to match all the other stuff. One other PCC element that you may or may not notice, and if you haven't noticed it, that's a good thing because it's been done deliberately, and that is these tank bars. So if you've seen the unit garage tanks before, you'll notice that there isn't actually any bars here. This is something that we've done here and produced these in-house. I don't really like the fact that the unit garage tank, when fitted, because it's a flat bottom tank, leaves a void here. I don't want that void to be noticeable. So we came up with these tank bars, which has been powder coated, the same factory BMW colour as the frame, because I wanted your eye to be taken away. I didn't want a cover here, because if you put a cover there, you'll notice that you're trying to cover something up. I didn't want to cover anything up. I wanted it to look like it's there, but not there, obviously. So I think we've absolutely nailed it with these tank bars. It's just a little PCC touch. We're all about the details here, and I think that's one of those details that we've done really well. So as you might be able to see from the lights that we're filming with, there's a little bit of pearl in this black, but the guys have put some copper pearl into the black to make it pop. Obviously, inside, under artificial light, does this bike no favours. Get this bike outside in the sunshine and it absolutely pops. The guys at Valkyrie have done what they do best and done a stunning paint job, so big fan of it. Exhaust system wise, it's got the unit garage headers, front to rear, and then we have the Arrow end can. At the moment it doesn't have the baffle in, but the baffle has been Cerakoted to match the exhaust system, so if the customer wants to run a baffle, you haven't just got this bright stainless steel baffle sticking out. The Arrow can, once again, ticks the vintage box. The customer wanted a can that gave the right noise, but also aesthetically hit the note as well. So he wanted to keep the rear wheel exposed, but didn't want a high level can because he wanted to look old school and nostalgic. So the Arrow end can ticks that box and looks pretty slick, and I'm really, really happy with it. Now, one thing we can't gloss over is the Wilbur shock. Every bike that we possibly can fit one to, we will fit one to. The TKC 80s are, obviously you can see from the tread pattern, they're a large chunky tyre. At low speed, they're going to be quite bumpy and feel quite uncomfortable. But anything over 30 miles an hour, you tend not to feel them anymore. However, the Wilbur shock, and because it's been built specifically for the customer's weight and riding ability, it basically irons out all of the high frequency vibrations that you get from a chunky tyre like this. So if you're going to go with a chunky tyre, definitely spend some money on the Wilbur shock. It will make a huge difference. Now, you might not think it'll make a huge difference, but if you fit these tyres without the Wilbur shock, ride it, and then ride it with the shock afterwards, you'll then feel the difference and you'll be like, well, why didn't I do that sooner? It'll make a big difference indeed. Final piece of the puzzle on this bike is the rear end. It's got the back mudguard kit with the back light, which is the tail and brake. Normally on the triangular bracket here, there is some elbow brackets for the indicators. Customer didn't want that. He wanted it to be as condensed as possible. So we've taken the Kellerman Attos and just fitted them here to the rear of the frame using the Kellerman Atto elbow brackets. Obviously, being Kellermans, they are ridiculously bright, blindingly bright, in fact. So we know that from a safety point of view, they're always going to be seen, and we know that it's going to be an MOT pass because of how far they are apart. So a bike that is full of details. Obviously, PCC, we love the details, and we think it's also a bike that sits beautifully in the PC family with the PC01, PC02, and this filling the gap for the PC03.